I'm Kevin Zeese, and I'm one of the core organizers of October2011.org. And what we're going to do is we'll have a little dialogue. I'll make some introductory comments, and Margaret will talk, I'll talk, she'll talk, then we'll hear from you guys. And we'll try to keep our comments brief so we can have a conversation with you, which I think will be the most interesting part. I'm supposed to set the table. That's my initial job. Or am I supposed to rearrange the furniture? Set the stage. Set the stage. So the stage that we want to talk about is that we are right now in the early stages of an epic struggle. And it's an epic struggle between people taking power from the concentrated corporate powers that have the power. It's an era where we're shifting from representative democracy to participatory democracy. What we're doing is what Buckminster Fuller said. You don't make change just by going at and banging at the existing structure, you build new structures. The way we can stop cooperating with the current system is to create a new system of media, a new system of a participatory economy, and new kinds of politics, like what we're talking about doing at Freedom Plaza. Today, the Census Bureau came out with its annual report. It showed a record number of Americans are in poverty, 46.5 million. It shows that since 1999, in this century, we've seen a 7.1% decline in household income. So we already had a population that really had not seen a raise since 1973, and now we're seeing a 7.1% decline. We're seeing college tuition at very high levels and college debt at record high levels at a time when the jobs that kids come out for are lower paying and under their employment, under their educational ability for the kind of job it would be. So that's a bad mix for the youth coming up. We have record high unemployment right now in the District of Columbia for youth. And, and we also are in a situation where many of the facts that were told in the media, government reports and such on unemployment, are false. For example, in 1994, they changed the unemployment figures and stopped counting people who had been unable to find jobs and had just given up, who wanted to work but couldn't work. They stopped counting those people. And that makes a gigantic difference. We'd be into just by that change alone, be into 12 or 13% unemployment. If you took all the change, that's just one example of many. If you took all the changes made in how we count unemployment, we're at about 20% unemployment, not at 9%. And there are websites that can explain that in great detail. We have a website, by the way, called It's Our Economy. It's itsoureconomy.us. And it reviews this economic data. It has a couple of reports up already on the census data that came out today. So we try to stay right on top of the news. On the other side of the spectrum, while we're seeing increased poverty, increased lack of health care, decreasing incomes, decreasing wealth, in fact, the average family lost something like 27% of their wealth in this economic collapse. Decreasing wealth. What we're also seeing is the top getting extremely, gluttonously, disgustingly wealthy. And this is happening because we have a government and we have an economic system. We have economic elites and political elites who are driving us off a cliff. They are doing a lousy job running the country, running the government, and running the economy. They couldn't do much worse of a job. Quagmires all over the world, economic collapse, wealth divide at record levels. So here's, an example of the wealth divide that I think just is a stunning statistic. The wealthiest 400 Americans in this country have wealth equal to 154 million Americans. The top 400. The top 400 pays an average income tax of 17.1%, while somebody who makes $50,000 a year pays 25%. How absurd is that? The top 400 paying 17%, while some poor working guy who can't make ends meet is making, a 25% tax rate? It's absurd. It makes no sense. And the wealth of these wealthiest is expected to double in the next 10 years if we don't change course. The trends right now are off the charts. If you look at the economy like a football field, 100 yards, you take the first 99 yards, it's gradually going up the wealth gradually, you get to that 99th yard to the last yard, that top 1%, it starts to go up, but you get to that top 0.5%, and it just shoots up. That's the wealth divide is in that top 0.5%, top 1%. It really is the 99% of us versus the 1%. Even those in the top 2%, not in the top one, those 1 to 2% folks, they're all working for a living and nervous about the future too. Even those folks aren't feeling that wealthy, I got to tell you. But that top 1%, that top 0.5% is an exceptionally powerful position, and it pollutes our political economy. And I think President Obama probably exemplifies it best. Sadly to say, of course, in his last campaign, he ran for office without using campaign financing, had a record-setting campaign. In his current campaign, he's of course not going to go with the campaign financing that's available. He's instead going to raise $1 billion. How's he raising that $1 billion? There'll be lots of media about grassroots, but the truth is he's raising that $1 billion from very wealthy people. He's holding fundraisers where the admission price is $35,800. That's $1,000 more than the median individual income. Most Americans could not afford to go to one of his fundraisers if they put all of the money they earned in a year on the table. Now, how out of touch is a president going to be who's doing that? And that's why we're seeing a president who's making the kind of deals he made on health care. He got $20 million in his first campaign from the health insurance industry, and he took single payer off the table, despite the fact that 2/3 of Americans believe in single payer and have done so for 10, 15, or 20 years even, according to polls. So money is buying mistaken policy, and what we are seeing as a result of the pollution of dollarocracy in our political system is we're seeing a dysfunctional government, a government that cannot respond to very serious crises of homelessness, of record poverty, of 50,000 people dying a year from lack of health insurance, of the climate change issue. You know, he's about to rule in favor of this tar sands pipeline, this absurd environmental impact statement from Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, saying that the tar sands pipeline would be minimal environmental effect. That is just like laughable that she would even say that in public. But they did. The State Department did say that, and why it's laughable is because the tar sands in Alberta are the biggest carbon sink in the world. And when we tap into that carbon sink, we are going to go over the edge as far as climate change goes. How going over the edge as far as climate change, how that can be a minimal effect, it just boggles the mind that she would say that. So I'm going to stop there. That's the table setting we're in, a dysfunctional government, an immense wealth divide, record poverty, increasing homelessness, all these negative effects at a time when the wealthiest are gluttonously wealthy and grabbing for more. So I'll let Margaret take it for the next step.
Thanks. So how's everybody feeling right about now? All right, because we are in a very serious situation. We have maybe 1 or 2 generations to turn this situation around for human life on the planet, and that's pretty serious stuff. But I'm not down. I'm very optimistic because we have the power to turn this around, and we have the knowledge to turn this around. I want to share with you a little bit of my story because I think that the facts and figures are really awesome, but it's really our stories that move us. And so I want to tell you a little bit about why I feel optimistic. I'm a pediatrician. I left practice about 4 years ago to advocate full-time for a national single-payer health plan, a universal comprehensive health plan. And I'm excited that Dr. Garrett Adams is here tonight. He's the president of the organization I work with, Physicians for National Health Program.
Very good organization, by the way.
In 2008, when President Obama was elected, I was pretty excited because he came from Chicago, which is where the national headquarters for Physicians for National Health Program is. And one of our co-founders, Dr. Quentin Young, was actually a neighbor and a friend of President Obama. They had campaigned together in Illinois on healthcare as a human right. And President Obama's physician was Dr. Quentin's partner. And so President Obama was very familiar with single payer. And had been quoted previously saying that single payer was the solution. So we thought, great, here's our opportunity. We have a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a president that knows what single payer is. So we got in there and we started meeting with members of Congress, and we said, hey, we've got all this great data, we've got great legislation. When you start bringing this, this bill together in the committees, include us. We want to compare what you're putting together with what we're offering on the basis of how many people are covered and how much it costs. Because we knew that a single-payer system would be universal, everybody in, nobody out, and we could provide that high-quality comprehensive care for the same amount of money that we're spending now, that we could actually start controlling our healthcare costs. But reality kind of sunk in May when they began the first series of hearings in the Senate Finance Committee with Senator Max Baucus. Because when we looked at who they were inviting to testify, it was all of the lobbyists for the pharmaceutical industry, the lobbyists for the health insurance companies, the Business Roundtable and Chamber of Commerce, but nobody there representing the single-payer view. So we wrote them and we said, will you include some of our nationally known experts? And they said no, and we didn't give up. We had the base out there, the large single-payer supporter base, emailing and phone calling into the Senate Finance Committee saying, just allow one single-payer advocate to testify, and they still said no. So what are we going to do now? We're being completely shut out. We decided we were going to go down there and expose the fact that we were being completely shut out. So 8 of us, 3 physicians, 2 lawyers, Kevin was there, 3 other advocates for healthcare reform, went to the committee and we stood up one by one and we said, why aren't you allowing single-payer advocates to testify? And we were each arrested, but that was in front of C-SPAN and in front of 2 tables of press. So the word got out that we were being actively excluded. The upshot is that we did get to testify after that in the other committees. They ignored our testimony. But what I learned out of that experience, I was able to see up close and personal what actually goes on in Congress. And what actually goes on is that the industry writes the bill to their benefit. They write the talking points. The members of Congress give those talking points. They tell the leadership of the parties in the White House what talking points they should use, and they use those talking points. So we're seeing a really industry-dominated, Wall Street-dominated political process. But the good news is that they're a minority, and we're a majority. So we have ways of turning this around, and when we started talking about the October 6th movement and going to other advocacy groups and saying, are you interested in joining together in solidarity to really bring our numbers together and shift the power to the people, they were all thinking the same thing at the same time, that we just had to get out there and say it. This consciousness was already developing, and we're seeing it around the country and around the world. So I think Kevin's going to talk a little bit about how do we shift that power to the people.
So we've all been involved in various protests and demonstrations over the years, and we've seen their lack of effectiveness. And so we wanted to figure out a way to approach this in a way that could really work, that could really begin to have an impact. And so we started to think about it and research it, and found this great group called the Einstein Institute outside in Boston area. And they've been studying for nonviolent political change now for 50 years. And they've watched as mostly dictators around the world have been toppled. And we started reading their books, started looking at the commentary about their work. And what we found was that the movements in the United States have been doing it pretty wrong. They've been just going out there and doing a rally or a march and going home without any kind of grand strategic plan, without any kind of analysis of what powers are holding up the system that we need to be able to confront. And as we looked at it, we saw that there are basically, we're a pluralistic government, and there are about 9 pillars of power that we need to confront and weaken before we can take political power and begin to shift it to the people. Those kinds of pillars would include things like the business community. That's a very powerful force, particularly the big business, concentrated wealth, big finance community. The military, the police, workers, youth, the media. Those are some of the examples. And so now what we're trying to do now is target our efforts so we confront those pillars. For example, we discussed the media. We discussed how we can become our own media, not just our own reporters, but become our own media outlets. You know, if you take the people in this room and combine our networks, you would find that we have an outlet bigger than many newspapers in the country, just in this room. That's pretty interesting. Same kind of thing we're talking about with workers. I mentioned that we're trying to build an alternative economy. That's already starting to happen. We see, for example, the co-op movement in the United States has grown dramatically over the last 30 years. So that now there are people throughout the country who know how to start a co-op, know how to start a business where the owners are the workers, know how to start a company where the consumers are the owners. And we can learn from that and build our own alternative economy, and that way strengthen workers and challenge business. We've also learned in the last decades, relearned I should say, because there used to be a lot of these community-based banks. They disappeared at the beginning of the last century, and we evolved into this kind of Wall Street-dominated banking system. But community banks are a very powerful force. And people are relearning the reality that we don't control our own money. That in fact money is created not by government, but by the Federal Reserve, by the banks themselves. Loaned then to the banks at very low interest rates, often under 1%, and then loaned to the government at higher rates and loaned to us at even higher rates, putting the government and us into debt. Every war we fought, we could not afford, and that has caused more debt. Community banks return that money to the community, and there are ways under the current law of how community banks are regulated, how you can influence where that money goes. If you go to our website, it'soureconomy.us, and put in the search democratized economy, you'll see a series of sessions that Margaret and I organized in August on economic democracy. And there are several of them about community wealth, about banking systems, about finance, how to get control, several about co-ops, several about the environment, about job creation, all sorts of issues.
We're starting with an action on Freedom Plaza here in Washington, D.C. on October 6th. We're going to be staying in the plaza. Thousands of people have already committed to come and stay with us. We're working in solidarity with movements around the world who are actually holding solidarity actions as well. There's a group from Spain that's marching to Brussels, and they're holding a solidarity action on October 8th in Brussels, Belgium. So we're excited about this because it's part of a global day, a global movement that's happening, an anti-neoliberal movement that's cropping up. We also read an author named Bruce Levine, and he's actually going to be with us in Freedom Plaza. And Bruce writes a lot about what does it take to get people up, because what's happened in our nation is really quite sad. As a pediatrician, and Dr. Adams is a pediatrician too, we know that more and more children are being diagnosed with being disruptive or being too active and being medicated or maybe being depressed. Well, what Dr. Levine sees is that maybe that's kind of a normal reaction to what's happening in our society. We don't have a healthy society right now. People are very isolated. We've lost a lot of community. We've lost a lot of this joy and this love. Wealth inequality brings with it fear and distrust. And the trust levels in the United States are off the record compared to other industrialized nations. And so how do we start to address that and bring that back and realize that we can be trusting, that we can be loving, that we can be the things that human beings really need to be healthy. And Dr. Levine talks about two essential ingredients in getting people to be active, and one is individual self-respect. So we have to have respect for ourselves and believe that we can be leaders, believe that we can be empowered, and that's part of being the media, is that believing that your voice is important and that you have something to say. It's also collective self-confidence, that we together have the self-confidence that we can solve our problems. And that was our economic democracy track was part of the Democracy Convention in Madison, Wisconsin, that had 9 different democracy tracks. And what was very excited about this convention that had over 1,000 people there for the first one, these were all people doing work in democratizing education, democratizing elections, democratizing the Constitution, all these different areas. And so in that one convention, we had so many solutions. And to each of the 15 crises that we face in our nation right now, we have evidence-based solutions. Single payer is one of them when it comes to health care. So we have the knowledge to turn things around and create a really peaceful just, and sustainable society. And it seems that that's really what human beings want to have and what we require if we want to go forward. So we're excited about this movement. It's independent because it's clear that we've got to be independent of political party if we want to be effective. We cannot align ourselves with any political party. We saw that in the healthcare debate when so many of the progressive groups, and I call them fake progressive groups, because really they were driven by their funders and driven by the Democratic Party agenda. And when that agenda became less progressive, they just went with it. They didn't, they jettisoned their progressive ideals and stayed with it. We have got to be committed to the issues and the solutions, not the political party. And we need the independent media. And then eventually, we're going to be in a position where we can have independent politics, and that's going to be really important as well, because both the Republican and Democratic parties are corporate parties at this point at the leadership level. I'm not talking about individual people, because there's always a few individual people that are well-meaning people, knowledgeable people, but in this current political system, those parties are corporate-dominated and they're dysfunctional. So we have to have an independent politics as well. We're not there yet. So we don't think that really we should be putting much energy into elections at all at this point, because until we build a strong independent movement with independent media, we're going to get the same stuff no matter who's put into that political process. So we're very excited. We thank you for being here tonight, and we're happy to take some questions.
Anyone has any questions? Raise your hand.
Dr. Yerton.
Did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what's going to happen after the demonstration in Freedom Plaza?
Take some with you,
Margaret, you mind said?
Sorry, what's going to
What's
happen?
going to happen after October 2011?
Yeah, so we're going to stay in the plaza. It's open-ended right now. We're going to leave when we feel like we're ready to leave there and move on to the next phase. And we now have state coordinators in, I think, about 30 or so states. And so the action is going to move back locally to that where part of in the plaza is going to be educating about methods of non-cooperation. So people can learn about local currencies, about participatory budgeting, about co-ops, about the importance of building sustainable communities, about how to effectively take on at the community level things that are happening in their community with education, with healthcare. So these are the things we're going to move back into our communities and work on and continue to spread the word and build this independent movement. And we see it as really there's going to be a back and forth between the local actions and coming together as necessary for strategic national actions.
I just would add to that, a lot depends on what people in the plaza want to happen. We're not going to dictate the future. We're setting this system where we're trying to listen and involve and create leaders and everyone who's there. And so when people tell us what they want to happen, we're ready to continue moving forward. We see this as a long-term marathon with hurdles and not a short-term sprint. And so we plan to be involved in this in whatever we can for the long term. But what happens with this movement depends on the people in the movement.
Dr. Flowers, my name is Kurt Gold. It's a pleasure to meet you from across the room. In 1970, I walked next to David Axelrod protesting the war in Vietnam on Wall Street. In 1971, I hired a bus that Jack Lew was on to protest that same war. Margie Schatz and I went to Washington University together. So I'm very familiar with your movement. My question is, everyone in this room voted for Barack Obama. We believe in him. Well, almost everyone in this room. We believed in him. We knew there were some problems, but we believed. How did all of these people that I just mentioned end up getting corrupted? And what's our assurance that that won't happen with this movement?
Well, that's why we believe it's so important to be independent of this and to be working outside of that political process and putting pressure upon it. This is going to be a difficult struggle, and there's another few principles that Albert Einstein talks about, and what does it take to have an effective movement. And that's what we're committed to. The 4 things are empowering the oppressed. It's the people that are affected by what's happening that need to be the ones who are empowered to take action. And then he talks about building a strong internal resistance force. And that's what we hope will be in Freedom Plaza, people that are willing to take the risk that they need to gum up the machine a little bit. He talks about weakening the institutions, democratizing them, and then having a grand strategy. And that's what we're working towards is this vision, this grand strategy of where can we go to be effective. Along the way, we're going to have to look back at what has happened before and remember that, and to avoid those pitfalls. One thing that is a tendency to happen is that as gains start to be made, people feel like, oh, great, we're on the right track now. We don't have to, we can back down. We have got to be committed to not back down until we are where we need to be, until we're in a society that's peaceful, just, and sustainable. So those are some of the things that we're going to be warning people about as we move along to avoid that. But I think it's really important not to work inside of that power structure. We've seen it in the single-payer movement. I saw it in New Mexico, where they had a very strong single-payer movement, and then the state legislature brought a lot of those leaders into committees to work on health care. It completely destroyed the single-payer movement in that state. People were excited. They thought, oh, great, now I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to be on the inside. But it didn't work. They were so busy that they couldn't hold any single-payer meetings anymore. So these are the things we have to be watching for as we move forward.
I'm just so pleased that I was able to come to this meeting tonight. I didn't know about October 2011, except peripherally a little bit for Margaret. Had the pleasure of meeting Patch Adams in April, and talked to him about some work and about single payer, and he joined our little discussion. And then he sent me a $250 check, and he says, "This is my fee to join." He says, "Be more like Margaret Flowers." He says, "Make noise." So that's Patch Adams. That was a comment that was made. Also, the reason I came today is because Senator Bernie Sanders held a hearing. Is poverty a death sentence was the title of the hearing, and I had some experience with a free clinic in Appalachia, and he asked me to tell the stories, which I did. And so this is a big deal to provide testimony in a Senate hearing. So my wife says, "Well, did you tell the Hamels? Did you tell the McMillans? And so I began to start making a little list. And so then I wound up kind of going through my email list, and I said, "Yes, they would like to know, they would like to know." And so I got the list, and I sent it out, and it went viral. And then I saw my congressman today, and he said he asked his legislative aide, "Will you have his testimony? Or put it on our website." And other people had done that. So I was really impressed by Annabelle's concept of using the media, and the new social media especially. But that was my experience, and so a friend of mine put the URL for it was streamed. And so that's gone around, and so surprising to me, my face now is all over the place. And so it's just an example that I've had today. And I say Bernie Sanders for president.
So that's.
He doesn't say that, though, does he? Unfortunately. You want to say
and I was just saying, but that's the important thing is that we have to see that each and every one of us, we have to. We have to stop looking at our leaders to be the ones to change things for us, and we have to start seeing that each and every one of us has the power to change things for us. That's what it means, individual self-respect, and we need to empower ourselves. And that's what the October 2011 movement is about. It's about bringing a voice to the people and the knowledge and the tools to the people to affect these changes.
Okay, hello, my name is, for those who don't know me, my name is Eric Sheptock. I'm a homeless advocate here in Washington, D.C. If you Google Eric Sheptock, you'll get like 42,000 entries. But anyway, I'm known for my use of the internet, to say the least. But what I want to say, though, is that we're talking about reaching out to people who are most directly affected, and I should tell you that the homeless are a very disenfranchised group of people, but the other part of it is this, though. A lot of times, you know, you talk about the corporations being or buying out government, you know, but what we have in the poor community is that the poor folk have been bought out by government because government does have some social programs. They're kind of tearing down the social safety net, which that much is true. But at the same time, a lot of people don't want to get involved in direct action because they can't afford to go to jail. If they go to jail, they might lose their HUD housing, they might lose their food stamps, they might lose some other social benefit. And so let's go back to what Kevin said a few minutes ago about how that you can't just tear down the existing system, you have to actually build your own. Or there's an expression that says, any old jackass can take down the barn. It takes a real carpenter to build one. You know, and so you know, we have to make some kind of effort to really build up our own kind of internal social safety net that where we can help people who are poor when they come and get involved, because oftentimes they'll have to miss that free meal at a place called Some, which is others might eat, because your event might be at the time that Some's up there feeding people, you know, and there are many times that the homeless don't go to meetings that really would benefit them because of the fact that they have to go to free meals, and so that they miss all the events that would help them to rise above their situation. And so within our networks, we have to figure out how are we going to provide food and whatnot for the poor people who come down to our event, so they don't have to miss our event because they spend so much of their day just trying to make ends meet. And I should also say this a little bit first, and then hand it off to Kevin here, which is that this past Saturday, many homeless people got really excited because Barack Obama went down to one of the biggest shelters in the country, which is right here in D.C., the CCMB shelter on 2nd and E Street. And he went down to D.C. Central Kids to tell them what a great job they do feeding 5,000 homeless and hungry people every day. Okay? And we kind of got upset, some of us did, because of the fact that Congress is up there talking about cutting $5.7 billion from HUD funding, which is Housing and Urban Development, housing for poor people. And at the same time, there was an article about how that over the past 10 years, they've lost more than $60 billion in contracts over in Iraq and Afghanistan. So you lost 10 times what you're taking from the poor community, you know, and so you don't have $6 billion for HUD housing, but you have $60 billion to actually burn over there in Iraq and Afghanistan in screwed up contracts. Okay, and what's going to happen is that they're going to put 600,000 families across the country out of the HUD housing. That's about 2 million people that might get put out of HUD housing beginning in November. It's November, so it's right around the corner. And then it's going to get put on the state and local governments to take care of the newly homeless that were created by the federal government, by Congress. And then, of course, D.C. has a shortage of shelter. We have 7,000 homeless. We're going to have 12,000 more in November and December. They don't have enough shelter. And then if you're a homeless family, your kids get taken away, get put up for adoption, so it kind of spirals out of control. So that's just my little spiel about how bad things are getting. But we have to figure out a way that within our networks, we can help the poor people so that they don't have to miss what we're doing in order to go get the free meal.
All right, thanks.
So Mom, you got that photo up. Mom,
Yeah.
you got, so you got that photo up. You want to say something?
Well, we're excited about the people that have been joining this movement, because when Eric was speaking, it reminded me that one of the heads of our legal team is a Superior Court justice, retired, who was in Iraq speaking out about the corruption and the money that was being lost. He was in charge of that accountability project and got mistreated for speaking out. And Sherry Hunkala, who's a homeless advocate in Philadelphia, who's been arrested over 200 times sitting in houses and insisting that people be housed, and she's running for sheriff on a no evictions platform. So these are people that are really out there with integrity, speaking out. And when the British, we live in an empire. Did anybody not know that? That the United States...
The biggest empire in world history, by the way. It's a secret among Americans, but it is the biggest empire in world history.
So
never discussed, of course, the homeland.
In India, when Gandhi was taking on the British Empire, and they said, "What, do you expect us to just walk out of here?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And they said, "How do you think that's going to happen?" And he said, when the 100,000 British in this country, the hundreds of millions of Indians are not cooperating with them, then the 100,000 British will see the wisdom of leaving the country. And that's what we need to do. We need to come together as tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and show our economic power, show our people power, become educated and empowered, and show the political elite the wisdom of cooperating with what's going on at the rest of the 99% level. So thanks.
And as a closing comment, one thing we're trying to do with October 2011 is unite the issues. Eric did a great job of that, talking about the waste in Iraq and the cuts at home. And I think President Obama's done a great job of that too. When he submitted a budget to Congress, he was going to cut or freeze everything except the military, intelligence, and homeland security, which makes up 66% of the budget, those three things. Everything else will be cut or held steady. And so all the human needs, all the environmental needs, all the money needed to build the economy up, shift to a clean energy economy, all will be cut, while President Obama and Republicans protect, the militaristic programs that exist. And so what we're doing on October 6th is not just the beginning of the 11th year of the Afghanistan war, it's also the first week of the new federal fiscal year. And so the new budget is an austerity budget. And so that's why we have the poverty groups, the homeless groups, the unemployed workers, environmental groups. Already 130 plus organizations are signed on to help promote this event. And they've joined because it unites all these issues together. We recognize that the twin problems that we face are corporatism and militarism. So if we have a chance to talk to the media, we want to end corporatism, we want to end militarism. It's a very simple message. That's what we want to see happen. Now, we're promoting this event as much as we can online. We also need to do it in person. We have up here a bunch of these nice postcards. And we're going to take as many as you need. We have more, we can bring it in and run out. Take as many as you need and put them in your local coffee shops. Put them into your, bring them to local community meetings. If you're involved in political groups, share them with them. Get the word out. And this card will do it and help make that happen. We need to have a turnout in D.C. that matches the turnout of people coming from outside D.C. And so the local community is very important, and you're all in that community, and you can all help to make that happen. So I want to thank you all for coming, and I appreciate your interest in this, and I hope we can have a successful major first step toward the kind of independent, participatory democracy movement that we need. Thank you all very much.